Hey, MD Moms, this is Valerie. I just decided to go live. There's been something weighing on me in the last few days, and I've been trying to communicate or put it onto paper or something what's been going through my mind. And I guess in the last couple of days, I had really been thinking after reading some of the posts that other moms are writing and kind of answering sporadic questions about Ryan's supplement results and such. I thought, how can I best visualize for others what it is I'm thinking and trying to work on? So, really quickly, as you all know, when Ryan was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at age 14, he was 14 and a half. In hindsight, his symptoms began when he was 10 years old, but they were all dismissed. I mean, I pointed it out to the primary care physician, podiatrist, neurologist. The toe walking was basically what we were all fixated on. No one was concerned. So it wasn't until after his Achilles lengthening surgeries and we had him in physical therapy that we figured out that he had muscular dystrophy type unknown. And then I spent the next 24 hours trying to figure out how he got it, and I spent 48 hours trying to figure out if we could cure it, and I spent every day of the last 6 years trying to figure out what we could do to help mitigate it and slow the progression. So some of the things that I picked up along the way and just put into our tool belt were different things that people were using and doing, and I've talked about it before, but I'm gonna mention a couple of things. One is Vector, VECTTOR, the Vector machine. We had Ryan to see Dr. Rhodes, and on that by April of 2012, and then by August of 2013 I started him on supplements, and I had him on those supplements from August of 2013 to January of 2017. And here was my thought process as I was kind of gathering data throughout. And let me just switch it for a second so you can see. I really don't want you to see my messy room. Okay, so a couple of things that were kind of going through my mind as I did research, and I'm sorry for the glare. Peak muscle mass for guys and girls, peak muscle mass peaks around late 20s, early 30s. If you are in good health, you can maintain that level of muscle mass for another 10 or 20 years, and then there's an age-related decline of approximately 5% for every 10 years. So over here, I was drawing just something, to kind of graphically represent some of the stuff that, we know to be true. So this is just a simple graph about, age and weight. And so there's, if you ever, which I'm sure all of us have had our kids at the doctors, and, there's the percentiles, your child is this age and for this height and they weigh this much and they're in X percentile of whatever. But what I was trying to illustrate is this peak muscle mass situation and the good health. So if you'll bear with me, hopefully this is something that you can see and something you can interpret. So let's just go over a lifespan of, we'll say, 70-year period, okay? So over a 70-year period, the black dots are going to represent our muscle mass. So we say that it peaks for guys and girls around late 20s, early 30s. So let's say the black line represents a normal person's progression, where they go from infancy, toddler, adolescence, etc., and then they reach their peak here. And then the green, of course, would represent someone who's got above average health and fitness, and the red would represent someone who's got below average health or fitness, right? But as I graphically depicted, there's that arc. So there's a climb where the muscle mass increases, and then there is that plateau where we'll assume that no matter which category that they fit in, that they were able to maintain whatever their peak was for the next 10 and 20 years. And then they experience this gradual predicted 5% rate of decline. Okay? Now, my thought process or my experience with Ryan, and I'm going to use this purple marker to depict it, is in hindsight, Ryan, his symptoms began here. Okay? So that's when like the toe walking began, but he was still swimming and riding a bike, and you know, he was running just slower, and he didn't have enough symptoms to make us overly concerned. So I would say that he progressed maybe normally to that point, and then I would say he maybe made a transition from here to here. Okay? So we'll say that this is a health change here. And as you can see, let me just jump back here. I depicted a couple scenarios where someone who was maybe in poor health or fitness, when they hit their mid-20s, they decided to kind of clean up their diet or exercise, and they improved to realign themselves into like a better health situation, and then followed that normal bell curve again. And then here in the red is a depiction of someone who was in average health and on an average slope, and they went ahead and had some kind of condition or disease that impacted their health, and it brought them down to maybe below average, like we'll say my hypothyroidism or something like that, and yet they maintained, and then they followed that normal curve, right? But when I look at muscular dystrophy, and I was thinking about Ryan in particular, I was thinking about how his symptoms, he was on a normal curve, and then in hindsight, I would point to this being like a pivotal age and date, but here is representing his diagnosis. And once we got the diagnosis that he had an incurable degenerative condition, of course, you know, the expectation was that he was going to be in a wheelchair. So I'm going to depict a wheelchair. They predicted, when you look at the websites, maybe 10 to 20 years from onset. So 10 to 20 years from onset meant that Ryan would be in a wheelchair. And I'm not exactly sure where I want to draw, like what a wheelchair looks like kind of thing, but let's say he was able to maintain his health to that point. He was going to follow a curve that went up here, and then he was on a new curve. And here is Ryan's health. We were trying to keep him, of course, ambulatory and mobile for as long as possible. So trying to reach that 20-year point at which he would decline at a faster age-related decline because of the muscle disease. So then, well, you know, physically, if we just put peak, because we're talking about peak muscle mass, okay? So that's what we're talking. So he obviously is probably more fairly, his muscle mass is declining to the point where he can no longer stay mobile. So we'll say that he goes from here, diagnosis, and then his trajectory is here, and now he's not mobile, so now he's basically coming down. I mean, I don't know what exactly to parallel it to, but he's obviously on a different slope. So the question that I was facing with here is, how do I get him to stay as healthy and as mobile as possible so that he doesn't go like this in a nosedive into like a wheelchair in 10 years from onset, and that he can actually make it to 20 years or even longer was the goal. So I kept thinking, okay, this is where in hindsight it started, this is where the onset began, and now we're on this curve. And I am trying to have him hit milestones. So he just turned 20 years old. Between this period of age 15 and 20, Ryan has declined, and he really, in the November timeframe, he began to fall quite frequently, and I was convinced that we had reached the end of this particular period, and that Ryan was going to be in a wheelchair, effective immediately, and basically like he had peaked, and that like was going to arc us down. When I talk about the supplements that he was on previously, Ryan's nutrition was so poor. And I tried to implement supplements for the sole purpose of extending this arc, okay? Trying to get him to the 30-year mark or the 40-year mark of mobility. And so because I wasn't able to clean up his diet, I resorted to some supplementation, but I couldn't get them in. So now here we are, and we are at age 20, and this is where the blood work that I've shared on the group begins, okay? Ryan was here, and he was headed here. We put the blood work or the new supplements in place, and of course, I'm not sure where the trajectory is, but he stopped falling, and his aches and MD-related pains diminished, and he is still mobile, and my fear of him being in a wheelchair immediately have now been erased. And so now I'm not sure yet, how far along this path, but we are now going in the process of moving from here to here. And with muscular dystrophy, as we all know, it is impossible at this point, for lack of a cure, for us to get our children from where they are to one of these lines, of normalcy, so that they can peak and then have the age-related decline. But I don't believe that we are powerless, and that's what I'm clinging to. So what I have given Ryan is the devices and the tools that I think will help keep him mobile longer. So I'm using the vector device, and I've got the supplementation. We have the metabolic results, which showed that his ALT and his AST, one was originally 135 and the other one was 66, I believe. And this one went down to 44, and this one went down 40 points. So I think it went down 40 or to 60 points, but I'll check. But the supplements, we got the feedback on that, and so that's good results. So now the goal is to keep him along this curve if possible. But I do think that there's reason to hope that we can move them a little bit upwards with good supplementation and nutrition. So I have seen and heard some questions being asked about diets that we would recommend. And so here's what I would tell Valerie. And what I'm telling all of you guys. I think that there is an argument to be made in no matter what it is, that supplements can work if you have a quality supplement. And in my research, I am no expert whatsoever, but in my research so far, it's worse to put in a bad supplement than no supplement at all. But if your child is not receiving good quality nutrition in the form of fruits, vegetables, proteins, and a well-balanced diet, which I will share some interesting, I was doing a lot of research last night on the My Plate and what's recommended for well-balanced meals, but gut health is important, supplementation is important, a good diet is important, and so there was a question about gluten-free and worrying about fads. I would stay away from fads, but I don't think that gluten-free is a fad. I think that there is anything that is being genetically modified or something that's not naturally found in anything that's processed and been taken from nature and then modified in any way to put it into our bodies is not how our human bodies were designed to digest food.